Welcome to another deep dive, everybody. Today we are diving into the world of white-tailed deer.
Yeah, they're kind of everywhere, aren't they?
They are, and we actually got some incredible information from the Fox Run Environmental Education Center. They even rehabilitate fawns. And you'll be surprised by what you learn about white-tailed deer today.
No, for sure.
For example, did you know a deer can swim up to 13 miles an hour?
Really? Wow.
Yeah. They have a four-chambered stomach,
Huh.
and a rare few females can even grow antlers.
Oh, wow. That's interesting.
So we're going to go beyond the cute kind of Bambi images we have and go into a deeper world of white-tailed deer.
Yeah, I think a lot of people think of Bambi when they think of white-tailed deer, but they are much more than that.
Yeah, and they're not just in the forest anymore, are they? I feel like we're seeing them everywhere.
Yeah, they're becoming city dwellers.
Really?
Yeah, Fox Run shared a story about a fawn found in a bank parking lot. Yeah. It's interesting. Habitat loss due to development is pushing deer into urban areas.
Right, they're losing their homes.
Yeah, and then they're finding new sources of food, like those manicured lawns and gardens.
My neighbor is constantly battling deer in his prize-winning rose bushes.
Yeah.
I always see them kind of out more at dawn and dusk.
Yeah,
Is there a reason for that?
absolutely. Deer are what's called crepuscular, meaning they're most active at dawn and dusk.
Oh, okay.
So they kind of have learned to navigate our world.
So we're not around as much, right?
Right.
At dawn and dusk.
Yeah, so they take advantage of that time.
Smart. So speaking of navigating, what are they navigating towards? What do deer eat?
Well, white-tailed deer are herbivores with an incredibly diverse diet, over 650 different plants.
650.
It's a lot, yeah.
Wow, they really love their greens.
They do.
So that means they graze and browse, right?
Right. So grazing is eating grasses on the ground. Browsing is feeding on leaves and twigs from trees and shrubs. And don't forget that they're ruminants, which means they have that four-chambered stomach we mentioned.
Oh, right.
And they chew their cud.
Yeah, so they eat a lot of food,
Yeah.
and then they go to a safe place and regurgitate it and chew it thoroughly, breaking it down further.
Right.
So that's how they get the most nutrients from their plant-based diet.
Speaking of life cycles, let's talk about fawns.
Yeah. Okay.
How do those adorable spotted creatures turn into those big deer we see?
Well, it all starts with the breeding season, known as the rut,
Oh, yeah.
and that happens in the fall.
I've heard it can get pretty intense out there.
Yeah, bucks will compete for dominance and the chance to mate, but eventually it leads to the birth of those fawns in the spring.
Those spotted little bundles of energy are just the cutest. You mentioned earlier that Fox Run actually rehabilitates fawns, right?
They do.
So tell me, what goes into raising a fawn?
Well, does have this unique parenting strategy. So to protect their fawns from predators, mothers will actually leave them alone for extended periods.
Really? That seems so counterintuitive. It does, yeah. But that lack of scent and movement helps keep the fawns hidden and safe. The mother only returns a couple of times a day to nurse.
Oh, okay, so it's like the opposite of what we would do as humans.
Yeah.
But I can see where that instinct to rescue kicks in.
Yeah, exactly. That's why Fox Run has that 24-hour rule. Observe a seemingly abandoned fawn for a full day before assuming it needs rescuing,
That's good advice.
unless there's a clear sign of injury or danger.
Right.
So yeah, well-meaning humans might actually be doing more harm than good by intervening too quickly.
That makes sense. We probably shouldn't mess with nature too much. It seems like they know what they're doing.
Right. And it's really crucial to remember that fawns are not pets.
Right? I mean, they're super cute, but they
Yeah.
belong in the wild, right?
Absolutely. They have specific needs that we can't meet.
Right.
And trying to domesticate them often ends poorly for both the animal and the human. Fox Run shared a case about a fawn being kidnapped and sold on Facebook.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, it just highlights the dangers of trying to domesticate wild animals.
Yeah. So enough about the sad stuff. Let's talk about my favorite part of a deer. Those incredible antlers.
Okay.
I mean, they're pretty impressive to look at.
They are.
But they're not just for show, are they?
No, they're not. While those antlers may seem purely decorative, they actually serve a variety of purposes. First and foremost, they're a symbol of masculinity and they play a crucial role during the rut.
So they use them for fighting.
Yeah, during that time.
Wow.
But they're also used for much more than just fighting. For starters, they're incredibly useful for foraging. Bucks use their antlers to knock down branches and access food that would otherwise be out of reach.
Oh, okay.
They can also use them to dig for water and clear snow in the winter.
Wow, it's like a multi-purpose tool.
Exactly. And let's not forget about their role in visual communication. Antlers are a signal of health and genetic fitness to potential mates. The bigger and more impressive the rack, the more attractive the buck.
This is like their status symbol. I remember hearing that sometimes female deer can grow antlers. Is that true?
It is true. It's extremely rare, though, occurring in about 1 in 10,000 female deer.
Wow. That's wild. It's just a little reminder about how much we still have to learn about these creatures.
Yeah,
I
definitely.
always wondered, what happens to the antlers after they fall off?
Well, they become a valuable source of minerals for other animals. Things like rodents, squirrels, even other deer will gnaw on them
Oh, wow.
to extract calcium and other essential nutrients.
So it's like nature's recycling program.
Yeah, nature has a way of repurposing everything.
That's really cool. So we've talked about the deer themselves, their behaviors and all their body parts. But what role do white-tailed deer play in the ecosystem as a whole?
Well, they are considered a keystone species.
I've heard that term before, but I'm not really sure what it means.
A keystone species has a disproportionately large impact on its environment relative to its abundance. So their presence, or absence, can drastically alter the makeup of an entire ecosystem.
So, they have a really big impact, even though they're not necessarily the biggest animal out there.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, can you give me an example of that with deer?
Sure. There was a study from Ohio State University, and they found that deer grazing actually had a positive effect on reptile populations. By eating certain plants and clearing areas, they create habitats that benefit things like snakes, salamanders, and various invertebrates.
Wow, so they're helping the reptiles out.
Right, and that's just one example of how they act as a keystone species. Their actions have this ripple effect that influences a whole network of other species.
Huh, I never would have thought of that. But we can't ignore the fact that overpopulation can be a problem,
You're right.
right? Having too many deer in one area can actually cause problems.
Yeah, we touched on habitat loss pushing deer into urban areas, but overpopulation is another complex issue, and it's often driven by human actions.
So it's like we're kind of causing the problem.
Yeah, and finding a balance is key. We're going to dive more into the challenges and potential solutions in the next part of our deep dive, but let's take a quick break. We'll be back soon to explore more about the world of white-tailed deer.
Well, we're back to the deep dive. Before the break, we were talking about overpopulation of white-tailed deer.
Right.
And it sounds like humans are kind of contributing to that problem.
Yeah, the elimination of natural predators has really allowed those populations to grow unchecked in a lot of areas.
Oh, okay. So like wolves and mountain lions.
Exactly. They would typically help keep those deer numbers in check.
So now without them, deer populations can explode in certain areas.
Yeah.
So what happens when you get too many deer in one place?
Well, aside from the obvious damage to gardens and crops,
Right.
overgrazing can actually lead to a decline in certain plant species,
Oh, okay.
which in turn affects other animals that rely on those plants
Wow.
for food or shelter.
I didn't think about that.
It can also increase the risk of deer vehicle collisions
Oh, right. Yeah.
and the spread of diseases.
So it's a danger to us and to them.
Exactly.
So what can we do about it? How do we manage deer populations effectively?
Well, it's a really complex issue, and there are no easy answers. Traditional methods like hunting and trapping have been used
Right.
to try and control those populations, but there are ethical considerations.
Right. And a lot of people don't like that.
Exactly, and there are logistical challenges too.
Yeah.
And on top of that, the number of hunters is actually declining.
Oh, wow.
So that adds another layer of complexity.
Yeah. So it sounds like we need some new ideas.
We do. Alternative approaches, like sterilization programs,
Oh, interesting.
are being explored, but they come with their own challenges and limitations.
Yeah, I bet. It seems like finding a sustainable solution requires a lot of things to be considered.
It does. We have to consider all the scientific data, the ethical implications, and the social and economic factors.
It sounds like there's not a one-size-fits-all solution.
There really isn't.
Okay, so before we move on, I'm a little curious about deer farming. You mentioned it earlier, and I don't know anything about it.
Sure.
What's that all about?
Well, deer farming is a growing agricultural sector. So just like we raise cattle or sheep or pigs,
Right.
deer are raised on farms
For the same purposes.
for various purposes. Primarily, they're raised for their meat, which is considered a lean and healthy protein source.
Oh, yeah? Venison?
Exactly, and that's gaining popularity as a gourmet food item. Additionally, they're raised for their hides
Oh, right.
to make leather goods and for their antlers, which are used in traditional medicine, and decorative items.
So they're kind of like a multi-purpose animal?
They are, and as the demand for these products grows, deer farming may become an even more significant part of the agricultural landscape.
That's really interesting. I never thought about that.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've talked about their biology, their behavior, how they impact the ecosystem, and even agriculture. But there's one more thing I'd like to touch on. Deer often appear in our culture, in folklore and myths, and even religious texts.
Yeah.
Why is that? What is it about deer that makes them so significant in our stories?
Well, deer have held this special place in human storytelling and symbolism for centuries. Really, their presence in our culture reveals a lot about our relationship with the natural world.
So they're not just animals to us, they represent something more.
Right. For instance, in many Native American cultures, deer are seen as powerful spirit animals. They represent qualities like gentleness and grace,
Okay.
intuition.
I can see that.
The shedding and regrowth of their antlers
Oh,
are seen as a symbol of renewal and rebirth.
yeah, it's like they're reborn every year.
Right.
What about in other cultures?
Well, in Celtic traditions, deer are associated with the magical realm. They're often depicted as companions to fairies.
Oh, that's cute.
And in some Eastern cultures, deer are symbols of longevity and good fortune.
Wow, so they really have a diverse range of meanings across different cultures.
They do, and it really shows how nature can inspire us and connect us.
Well, it's like a universal symbol, even though the meaning might be a little different.
Right.
What about the Bible?
Yeah.
Are there any references to deer in the Bible?
There are. Deer are often seen as symbols of purity and gentleness and God's love and care for his creation.
Oh, wow.
For example, there's Psalm 42, which describes the psalmist thirsting for God like a deer pants for water.
It's like they represent that longing for connection.
Exactly.
Wow, that's beautiful. And we can't forget about St. Eustace, who had that vision of the deer with the crucifix.
Right.
It's really